Life is unexpected, to put it the absolute nicest way possible. You never know what's going to come at you next. A special opportunity, a brick to the head, hopefully metaphorically. It's a fun mixed bag of situations that we've just got to roll with, and that's always going to be a given. What we are left to deal with is figuring out just how to roll. How do we cope? What do we do? Are we supposed to do it alone? It's a journey that we will all inevitably embark on, and while I'm most definitely still going through it, I'm here today to assure you that you have your wildebeest. That doesn't really make any sense to you right now, but we will get there. Do you mind if I'm vulnerable for a moment? About 6 or 7 years ago, my mom fell to an enormous beast amalgamated of different autoimmune diseases, as well as other mental and physical afflictions. Before my own eyes, I watched her fade away as not necessarily the mom I knew, but a shell of her, or rather someone different altogether. And for a 12-year-old turned caregiver and her 8-year-old little sister, that's absolutely terrifying. Herself before then is even kind of a fuzzy memory to me now at 18. I mean, you have to grow up before you're ready to, and see and hear things you wish you hadn't. And that's all while navigating the snake pit of middle school. It's incredibly difficult not to feel alone, but what I learned is that I was pretty far from alone, for there were a lot of people who had experiences that weren't unlike my own. In fact, almost 1 in 5 adults in the United States struggle with some sort of mental illness, and 6 in 10 with at least one chronic physical ailment, according to both the National Institute for Mental Health and the Centers for Disease Control. That's not even including teenagers and young children, especially here in Eagle County, where if it puts it into any perspective, we double the national suicide rate. That also hasn't included people who are working on or have overcome their illnesses or have yet to meet them. So these, of course, are outrageous injustices on their own, but both put into perspective how many lives are touched both directly and indirectly by different illnesses. I, in a way, found a morbid sort of solace in encountering people who had had many of the same experiences I did and still succeeded despite their setbacks. Others were living through it with me at the time, which I came to know as my savior support system, my family. I don't think we would at all be in the same place if we didn't have our family, both extended and non-blood related, like our friends. I remember one night in particular where my mom was having a pretty rough time, which me and my sister were pretty used to at that point, because it was very ongoing, and a friend of ours, a neighbor, came to check in and just visit. And immediately he's there and he's like, "Oh, this looks wrong, for lack of a better word. We need to go to the hospital immediately." And I later learned via phone that she was on the cusp of irreversible organ failure and would have succumbed to it in a life-threatening sense. The very next day, my grandparents flew out from Michigan to come take care of us. I can't even fathom how different my life would be if not for that particular instance, all of the people involved in every instance before and after. Because isn't that insane to have that level of support? From that to financial help to navigating convoluted healthcare systems, we're making it through every step of the way thanks to everyone that's been there for us. I like to think about it in a couple different ways, but it all really depends on your definition of family. Maybe for you, they're blood related, people you were initially given, but maybe they're not blood related. Friends, colleagues, people you've chosen. Now say there's a giant wildebeest herd out on the Serengeti Plains. You've got your strong, but you also have your old, and your sick, and your weak young, all traveling together. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe you're not. But either way, you're all there. Now, say there's a hunting party of lionesses out and they start to attack Naturally, they'll go after our aforementioned sick and old and weak and young who aren't as apt to be able to defend themselves. Those stronger wildebeest don't just leave them behind for a better chance of survival. Instead, they create a circle formation and protect them, and those lionesses, trying as hard as they might, will eventually give up because predators can be overcome. So, you know, as maybe one of the more strong at the moment, or as one of our compromised groups, know that you've got and you can give that support. No matter how weak or tired or alone that you feel, you've got that support. And if you're still trying to find your family, know that you are worthy of that. I don't think I would at all be in the same place that I am without my wildebeest herd. I know how tempting it is to power through adversity without a focus on self-care and acknowledgement of the validity of your experiences. And the biggest lesson that I've learned, among many, is that to go through life and trauma in general isn't something that can be healthily tackled alone. The way that I had dealt with everything was like putting up a suit of armor. You know, shielded and strong and unafflicted. I got cold and normalized everything going on around me and felt that an outward strength would serve me best. Truth be told, it kind of did for a little bit. You know, I was able to grow up and move on and roll with the punches as someone strong would do. In fact, it still hasn't completely faltered. And that's the not so good part. I can openly assure you that this is the first time I've ever been completely, fully vulnerable about these experiences in front of a crowd of people, no less. I mean, bad things that happen to you, they're not fun, but it gives you something to talk about, right? It had been ongoing until mid-2019, and that's not even including the inner recovery process, and also a new challenge we've had to face, with my mom finishing up 7 weeks of chemo and radiation just a couple weeks ago. Within being vulnerable, I'm willing to admit that it's incredibly difficult, incredibly scary. I'm not always instinctively doing it. And I find it incredibly hard to still seek out my wildebeest, even though I know I've got that support system. But don't you sometimes? Don't you sometimes feel afraid to be open and to trust other people? Is it hard to seek out your wildebeest? I'm right there with you. I'm willing to bet that a lot of the people in this room are right there with you. And just being able to acknowledge that is brave. Being able to work on that is worth every ever-lightening step. And I can tell you exactly why. Emotional vulnerability is a necessary thing. It's well known that bottling up your emotions and never dealing with them is a detrimental practice. But that doesn't stop people from doing it. It's easy. If you sit and just feel all the overwhelming emotion, it's going to sap all the energy out of your body and never end. And that's what we're trying to avoid, naturally, as pain and people do. They're like two magnet sides that repel each other. But this, of course, is just a theory. If you sit and just experience thoughts and emotion fully, you'll be able to process them and make way for logical thought. That's, of course, if you don't feed it with negative thoughts or prohibit yourself from feeling it at all. That's really hard to do. It's very hard not to spiral. I understand that. But emotional vulnerability with yourself is also a key component to being emotionally vulnerable with other people, which is sometimes even scarier because instinctively you think you're facing judgment. You know, spoiler alert, you're not. Maybe if talking to a professional confidant is the better way for you to go, you still get that support, but with professional coping strategies. Maybe there's another tool that you want to use. such as, for example, art, which is something I'm very closely connected to, and all of these slides are old pieces that I made about 2 years ago as part of my own coming to terms process. There are so many ways to be open with yourself and with other people, but if there's one reminder I cannot stress enough, it's that isolating yourself is painful and suffocating. So there might also be some of you asking, oh, well, I hear all this stuff about vulnerability and really good for you, but how can I support myself and other people who are going through these situations? I'm so glad you asked. Being there financially or just resource stuff in general isn't something that's always viable for other people. That and being told to just be there sometimes can be really confusing because it means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. So here are a couple of quick tools that I've found to be there for yourself and other people. 1, educate yourself. There are tons of reliable online sources, but there's also people, therapy, if you want to avoid the WebMD-esque panic. 2, put that wealth of information to use. Certain conditions can benefit from certain types of knowledge, such as care. 3, know what you want and ask others what they want. Sometimes you can ask, what do you need, instead of, are you okay? 4, patience is key. Be patient with yourself and other people, especially in sensitive situations. I hope that you can go forward and apply these to how you are a part of your friends, family, colleagues, diverse wildebeest herd. But overall, I hope you remember that self-care, self-love, and self-respect is important above all else. Be there for yourself and for your family, blood-related or not. Let yourself feel. And be vulnerable. Get really good at it, practice it, and know that it's not only because you can, but because you've got that support.